Welcome to Cera Online, Mr. Minister. We have with us Mr. Chakib Khelil, Minister of Energy of Mines of Algeria, Chairman and CEO of Sonatrach, who was last year President of OPEC, and is President also of OPEC, I think, Mr. Minister.
This year.
We would like first to start by an assessment of OPEC's strategy after September 11. You were at the time the President of OPEC. You were presiding of this conference in November that decided that OPEC should cut production only if some important non-OPEC producer came in and shares the burden. A few months later, what is your assessment?
Well, if you just recall, our strategy, was aimed at stabilizing the oil market, and our objective was to introduce this price band mechanism, 22, 28, and achieve $25 per barrel as a stable price. You remember that in 2000 we increased actually production 4 times to stabilize, the oil market. If you remember, prices went up to $33 and even higher. And as a matter of fact, in a few cases, we were not able to achieve the price of $25. Of course, the economic downturns that came early 2001 changed all of that. And before the September 11th, we had already reduced our production by 3.5 million barrels per day. And while at the same time you had other countries, non-member countries, that were actually increasing their production while we were decreasing ours. For example, production increased about 1.5 million barrels per day from non-OPEC member countries in 2000, 2001. And when September 11th came, the prices, you remember, the same day increased tremendously. So OPEC strategy was really for a stable market, and we quickly reacted to that event by saying we wanted to make sure that supplies were there for the market, and that actually appeased the market, and the prices went down to I think $22, $23. After that, of course, the OPEC, since it decreased quite a bit its production, evaluated the market and needed really, for stabilizing the market, a decrease of 2 million barrels. So in our November 14th meeting, we considered that OPEC countries actually made sufficient effort that year by reducing 3.5, that if they had to reduce another 2 million, and also having their production being replaced and some of the market being taken over by others, was not really fair, was not equitable for all producers. And we decided that we should ask our non-OPEC members, some of them actually are observers in OPEC, like Russian Federation, like Mexico, and others are observers. And we asked them to see in what way they could contribute to that reduction of production. And unless they reduced, we were not really ready to reduce further our production. This is how on January 1st there was a reduction of 2 million barrels per day, including 500,000 barrels, of non-OPEC members. That agreement is still holding. There is a good discipline in the market. The prices are stabilized around $20. Given the economic conditions of the world, I don't think we can hope at this time to see better prices than that. So that in the second quarter maybe we're going to have a further weakening before prices might strengthen in the second semester of this year because of the economic situation in the world, because we are already seeing in the United States especially some signs that economy is improving, and consequently, if economy improves in the U.S., that will have some impact on European and Asian economies, and demand will increase and prices should strengthen. But we don't think really that prices are going to be going toward the $25 target that we have for our objective.
Mr. Minister, you mentioned that in the second quarter, as usual, demand is the seasonal decline in demand. We heard yesterday the advisor to President Putin saying that for Russia it would be difficult to commit itself in the second quarter, that Russia market share used to be 11 to 12%, it had dropped to 6%, and that Russia's national interest was to increase at least its market share. What would you do if Russia decided not to go along in the second quarter by restraining production?
Of course, I mean, this decision has to be an OPEC, decision. We have a meeting on March 15th. I had been invited, as you know, by the Russian government to visit Russia on March 11th with the Secretary General, Dr. Ali Rodriguez, and also with the new president of OPEC. And as a matter of fact, I'll be going also on an official visit to Russia. You know that Russia and Algeria have deep relations from the old days, and we have Russian companies operating in Algeria like Stroitrangas and Rosneft, and I have received the president of Lukoil in Algeria, and we have a strategic relationship between Russian Federation and Algeria. It's probably a unique relationship between Russia and other countries. I think it's only the fourth relationship between two countries. Russian situation is similar to Algeria. Russia depends, of course, on revenues from the oil sector, but also to a great extent on revenues from the gas sector. In Algeria, for example, 40% of our revenues come from the gas sector. So there is a link between incomes from the gas and incomes from the oil. So of course, if there is a reduction in prices in the oil, this is going to affect the gas revenues. In addition, Russia has a $130 billion debt with European Union, I believe, that it has to deal with, and it receives, I think, around $40 billion, I think, revenues from the hydrocarbon sector. So it's an important revenue earners for Russia. When I see Russia, I'm talking about the government, and Russia is facing similar problems that Algeria in terms of unemployment, in terms of development and social needs and other needs. So Russia really is going to need to have revenues, from the oil sector. In this meeting and visit that we're going to make into Russia, we're hoping to be able to discuss this type of issues openly with the various decision makers in Russia, and hopefully we're going to be able to get Russia to cooperate and to continue to cooperate, because we believe it's in the interest of all parties concerned to continue the cooperation, the dialogue, for the benefit of Russia, the benefit of the OPEC countries, and I think for the benefit of consumers. If you recall, there was a situation a long time ago between Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, where Venezuela actually expressed the need to capture a larger share, of the market, and you know what happened there. I don't think it's in the interest of either party to go. I mean, I can tell you that OPEC now has 6 million barrels per day spare capacity. When the demand is very low, like it is now, countries, very small countries, become very important. Even Algeria becomes important in OPEC. Qatar becomes important in OPEC. But when the demand is going to grow, and demand is going to grow back again, 2003, then it's those countries that have spare capacity available who will dominate, the market. It will be up to them to decide what the price of oil is going to be, and not those who don't have spare capacity.
By the way, Mr. Minister, there was much talk about the suspension of the price band of $22 to $28. Is it really suspended?
Well, we cannot say that it was suspended because there was no decision made by OPEC to suspend it. I think OPEC is not able now to achieve the objectives set in the price mechanism because OPEC doesn't have really the leverage. I mean, as you can see, it doesn't have really the leverage because of the demand has been shrinking. So it has lost really the leverage that it had to achieve a stable price at $25. But it will regain that leverage, hopefully, next year, to achieve that level. That level of prices, which has been deemed reasonable by many players, including the U.S. and although to a varying degree by President Putin himself. He mentioned $20 to $25. Some people were talking about the low 20s. But I don't think really price level is the issue. I think the issue is security of supply, is stability, is eliminating uncertainty, especially in a world where we have so much interdependence, and where actually consuming countries are actually getting more revenues from taxation of oil than producing countries. For example, in 2000, I remember the numbers, that's why I cite them. In the year 2000, OPEC countries' revenues were $250 billion. In contrast, European countries, just from taxes imposed on petroleum products, got $1,000 billion, which means for every dollar that OPEC countries got, because they invested, they explored, they produce, they transport, and they get that oil to the market, they get $1. And the consuming countries, just by taxing their own consumers, get $4. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's equitable. And it's not really in the interest of security of supply. Because basically what that does is that even concentrates more oil in a few places, and I don't think that's in the security of supply interest of consuming countries. I think consuming countries have an interest in diversifying their sources of oil by encouraging and by promoting the exploration and development of new sources of oil, and we encourage that in OPEC to make sure that other countries have a chance, to compete, with us.
Mr. Minister, Algeria is a major exporter of gas, and you have been hosting the second gas producer exporter conference in Algiers a few weeks ago. Could you tell us more about it?
Well, you know that this was actually a forum of gas producers, exporting countries. It was the second forum. The first one was held in Tehran last year. And I think it's an innovative way of meeting, because we don't have really a bureau, we don't have an organization, we don't spend money except for the country that invites. And we had 13 countries. So we actually had representative of countries that had 70% of the gas reserves of the world.
What is the purpose of this forum?
The purpose of the forum was to exchange experiences in exploration, development, marketing, exchange information on contracts, on markets, find ways to cut our costs, like, for example, sharing transport, or maybe sharing interest between countries in each other countries to diminish, the price risks, and actually doing exactly what the consumers have been doing for the last 20 years. And you know that they actually have a formal organization that exchanges information on gas, so that companies are able to know the terms of this country's contract and the terms of that country contract, but I cannot myself know what Qatar contracts look like, or Iran's contract look like. So the forum is objective is to deal with that. We have decided, as a matter of fact, in the last forum held in Algiers, to organize a roundtable with consumers, with operators, with officials from the European Commission, and that roundtable is going to be organized by Algeria with the support of Russian Federation. As a matter of fact, supported the idea, and to exchange the points of views, for example, on the gas directives that was issued by the European Commission without consulting with the main producers and exporters.
I think you have a problem with the Commission about destination clause, if I understand correctly.
Well, we don't have a problem. I think they have a problem with their the concept of liberalization, deregulation. First comment I'd like to make is the one I just said, which was that there was no consultation. If there were consultations prior to issuing the directives with producers, I don't think we would have had the problems, between quotes, that we are seeing today. Second comment I'd like to make is that it took the U.S. 25 years to liberalize, deregulate, the gas market, and we still have some problems, after 25 years. So you cannot really deregulate and impose the rules of an open, transparent, competitive market to producers, exporters, when that market doesn't really exist. In fact, it does not exist because you don't really have free access to transport. You have conflict of interest between those who trade in gas and those who own transport. In addition, really, what's the hurry? Because the gas is already competing with other sources. That's why it's actually indexed on other fuels. The concerns that the European Commission has is that they want really low prices for consumers. But our concern, from experience on oil, is that yes, we could have a competitive gas market, but wouldn't the European Commission impose again a taxation system that would take, that benefit to governments and not to consumers?
Mr. Minister, you were mentioning also liberalization. There is a draft in Algeria about hydrocarbon law. Could you please elaborate on where is the draft now? Has it been approved by the cabinet? Is it going to go to Parliament? Because there have been some, I think, concerns about it.
The
yes.
new draft law. Well, first I'd like to say that we have already issued two important laws. The mining law last July, which opens completely the mining sector to private investments. And there is no difference really between the mining law, which concerned the mines and the minerals, and the new hydrocarbon law. Basically, it deals with the same mineral domain, except of course hydrocarbon is more important for Algeria. It provides 95% of the hard currency earning of the country. But I just wanted to say that from the beginning, that there was lots of resistance to the mining law, while the mining sector was a disaster because it was controlled by state enterprises that were bankrupt. There was no investment. So we corrected that by opening it up completely, by providing incentives for private investors, and by putting in place two regulatory agencies, one to award the contracts and to provide the information, and the other one to control application of regulation on environmental and other things. We issued a second law last December, which was the Electricity and Natural Gas Distribution Law, which is a very important law. And the law basically does away with the monopoly of the state enterprise called Sonelgaz, and will open production of electricity to private enterprises. As a matter of fact, we have already 3 ongoing projects for private generation of power in Algeria, and the law has arrived at the right time to allow the export of electricity to Europe through submarine cable that we are going to build directly with Spain. So now I come to the third law, which is the draft law of hydrocarbons. Of course, I mean, workers and the workers' union have always concerns that they're going to be losing employment, that we're going to privatize, you know, the state enterprise. But the draft law doesn't deal with privatization. The draft law does exactly what the mining law does. It separates the role of the state, which is to define the policies, the regulations, to control the application of the policies and regulations, and the role of the state enterprise, which should be a commercial, purely commercial economic role. So we are not privatizing the state enterprise. On the contrary, we are providing new incentives for more investments by the private sector to strengthen the state enterprise, actually, Sonatrach, to be able to do more things and allocate its resources better and become more international.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. So now you have to admire me.